Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today's panel on employee experience as a key differentiator, hosted by Ecom Venture Partners and VSO. This is Pankaj Gupta, Managing Partner at Ecom. Just to give you a brief overview on Ecom, we are a deep tech revenue accelerator based in Singapore. We have approximately 70 startups in our portfolio from different parts of the world, stages, and sectors. We are fortunate enough to also have partnerships with companies like Enterprise Singapore, Cybertech Hong Kong, Microsoft, AWS, Oracle, Twilio, Rackspace, and many more. And these are the organizations who are not only supporting our startups with perks and credits, but also in terms of customer acquisition through their fantastic ecosystem. VSO is one of the portfolio startups of Ecom, which is disrupting the performance management and employee engagement space using conversational AI. VSO and Ecom are thrilled to host this panel since it gives us a fantastic opportunity to connect with the subject matter experts, learn from their insights, and build a fabulous community. And as we all know, there's nothing without the community, and especially the world of crypto, Web3, and NFT. Nishit is the moderator of today's event and also founder of VSO. He will ask some truly intriguing questions to our esteemed panelists. I also request the audience to share their comments and questions in the chat section so that we can take them as needed. And I hope that you enjoyed today's event, today's insightful discussion, and connect with VSO after the event. Ecom panelists and VSO founders will be willing to connect with you after the event, explore collaboration opportunities, and obviously talk to you about Dubai or NFT or crypto or HR tech space. Now I will request Nishit to provide a brief introduction of VSO and take the event forward.
Sure. Thank you, Pankaj. VSOR is basically our attempt to put human back into human resources. This is what we have done in order to solve some real life pain problems and basically look at new ways of working, looking at the shape of the modern organization, which is networked, where everyone expects feedback in real time. And more importantly, a new world where people would like to turn up to work because they want to, not because they have to. And that's basically the way we have kind of started defining our own value proposition. And very excited to kind of be part of this journey. My own background is fully in HR, even though I do claim that I've done 3 weeks of engineering and 2.5 years of chartered accountancy. The fact that I chose not to complete those doesn't give me any brownie points. So yeah, I've spent my entire career doing HR. And the whole attempt has been to see how we can bring HR up to speed with the modern organization and how organizations should respond to the changes that are happening around us, whether it is in recent days, the remote working or hybrid working phenomenon, or just the fact that people need to work differently together. People need to work in teams rather than just in hierarchies. Been on this journey for 2 years now, 2 very exciting and eventful years where we got hit by COVID along with the rest of the world. Not an easy thing for a startup. We've survived, which is great. And we look forward to kind of solving some important problems that people face in their day-to-day workplace.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Nishit. Probably we can move on to our esteemed panelists and request them to do a brief intro of their work, of their organization, personal life, and then we can dive into the Q&A. Make sense? Anugopal, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah, thank you. So my name is Anu Gopal, and I am based out of Toronto, Canada. And I had the great pleasure of being working with people across the world over the last 20 to 25 years. And what that has helped me understand is that whether it is an employee of an organization or whether it is a partner who we are working with or a customer who we are working with, end of the day, as Nishit said, it is the human element that comes into play, and how we how we treat that human element goes a long way in how the relationship matures. And it is end of the day, it is people who make things happen. And it's very important for us to respect and understand that and be a part of that journey. That's where I'll stop. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anugopal. Atif?
Thank you. Ethom Ventures and VSOAR for having me here. I lead employee experience for Wipro. I'm based in the Bay Area, and my experience is across CPG, healthcare, digital and technology space in a variety of business partnership and roles that have led global centers of excellence. Really happy to be talking to you today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Atif. Really appreciate it. Casey?
Everyone, I'm Casey Rasmussen. I'm based in Minnesota in the US, and I lead client strategy for Virgin Pulse. Virgin Pulse is the world's largest health and well-being company. We're currently serving a little over 14 million members across 190 different countries, working with over 6,000 large employers, health systems, and public institutions across the globe. At our foundation, we are a behavior change company with a singular mission to change lives for good. Obviously, to do so, we need to partner really closely with our clients to both create and evolve an outstanding employee experience. So I'm super excited to be part of this panel today, both to participate and also to learn. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Casey. Larry?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Larry Donovan. I am the CEO of Namely. I am joining you today from New York City, and I serve as the leader of the company that provides a core platform of HCM software products to mid-market companies. So our job is to provide the tools that enable all of these amazing folks trying to drive those enhanced experiences for employees.
Thanks a lot, Larry. Really appreciate it. Now, before diving into the Q&A, I would love to show a brief 2-minute intro video of VSOAR so that you know what amazing things we.
If you are a business leader today, life can be challenging. With uncertainty becoming a norm and remote working common, inspiring your team's performance and keeping them engaged can be tough. Loss of engagement leads to reduced productivity, missed deadlines and strained relationships, leaving teams frustrated and demotivated. Traditional performance review is not only ineffective, but it is also extremely expensive. We estimate that it costs a US organization $492,000 for every 1,000 employees. When we work, we save information in different places. Our processes are also outdated. This makes work complex and employees feeling overwhelmed. So, how do you keep employees motivated, working at their best and hitting their goals? Introducing VSOAR, the first conversational performance management and engagement system in the world. As you can see here, you can collaborate, update goals, and manage performance all from a single screen. We use the app to tag collaborators and hashtag to update goals. Our solution makes working agile and enhances engagement. We use AI to create unmatched people analytics and nudges to create personalized actions to managers and employees to enhance performance. Nudges change behavior in small steps. The VSOAR app is a social and agile tool that can easily integrate with your HCM system while enhancing engagement and performance. Engagement surveys enable you to keep on top of motivation levels across the organisation and what works best to ensure teams reach productivity goals. We have 11 types of pre-built surveys to measure important times in your employee's lifecycle. We also give you the flexibility to create unlimited custom questions if you want to. Employees can share praise, collaborate with their peers, request feedback at the touch of a button, and check in instantly with others to help guide effective actions, causing motivation and productivity to soar.
Okay, that was a brief intro from VSOAR, and now let's move on to the most exciting part of the event, which is questions from Nishit and amazing answers from our panelists. Nishit, please go ahead.
Great. So just to kind of set the tone here before we get started, employee experience is a relatively new concept. It's not like fully ingrained in what we do. So I just want to set the base here and create the framework around which this discussion is happening. We've borrowed heavily from customer experience while defining employee experience as a concept. And the way we define employee experience is the intersection of culture, process, and technology. So what we believe is that for employees to feel great experience, an organization needs to do a great job at all three of these, because if any of these three is missing, then the experience breaks down. So a lot of questions that I'm going to ask the panelists here will fit within this overall broad framework of culture, process, and technology. And we would expect that we will learn a lot from practices and experiences of our panel members. And then you can take home with you all the different kind of ideas that can then help you get started on your own journey. Now, before we begin, I think it'll be criminal not to refer to all the big changes that have happened in the last 1 or 2 years in the world. And a lot of changes have happened. And most recently, we've been talking about the great resignation or the great reshuffle, now the great rehire. I don't know what next great thing will be. But the question is, whatever name we call it, whether we call it the great resignation or the rough reshuffle or the rehire or whatever it is, things have fundamentally changed. The employer-employee relationship has fundamentally changed. So I'd like to invite Anugopal, Casey, Larry, Atit, all of you to kind of take a go at it in no particular order. So possibly starting with Anugopal, since I see him earlier on my screen. How do you think has life changed since this whole reshuffle, resignation thing has happened? How are you as a business leader, as a manager, as an employee, and as a company dealing with this whole big change that is happening and that we are witnessing around here?
Thanks, Nishit. I guess everybody around the world is faced with this problem. So it's not a problem isolated to a particular region or not, right? And the interesting thing about the last 2 years has been that people have experienced things which they have never experienced before. Like they've only heard about it before. They've experienced it. They've seen it in front of their eyes. And that has made them to look at choices. There's a lot of choices people are making. And that's what people refer to as the great resignation, et cetera, right? As a part of what they have lived through in the last couple of years, people have also started moving to different ways of living, right? Like working from home created a completely new human behavioral pattern. In some cases positive and in some cases negative, right? But it is what it is, because the biggest thing about human beings is we are very adaptable. We adapt to the situation, right? So if I take away what we have learned in the last 2 years is that people have learned how to work remotely, right? People have learned how to execute things which people never thought could be done remotely. So that is one part of it. And technology has played a huge role in enabling that, right? If you can look at it, the use of Zoom, the use of Microsoft Teams, etc., over the last 2 years has significantly increased. In fact, Microsoft has added so many features in the last 2 years in a specific platform, which they have never done perhaps on any other products in the past, just because of the demand that has come through, right? Now, what that also means is now people don't look at a job as, the main decision point. It is one of the decision points in their life, which means that they could look at 4 different jobs and say, it is all the same to me. It really doesn't matter, right? And then comes, what then comes back to what you talked about, Nishit, the experience. So the experience then starts becoming more important than the job alone, right? And I think that's one among the main things I have seen, that people are focusing on what is my experience going to be and how is my life going to be going forward based on that experience.
Excellent. Thanks, Anugopal. In fact, I can't stop smiling because I've worked most of my career in banks, and the information security teams in banks are next to impossible to breach. They would basically stop everything from coming in the name of security. And things that I'd been asking for 8 or 10 years and which were constantly denied, suddenly were all made available in a matter of 4 weeks. And we were like, why couldn't we have done this earlier? Why couldn't you let people get access to information from home? So obviously this is a shift where we've been forced into this, but thankfully we've been able to make some good use out of it. So thank you so much. Casey, your perspectives on this whole thing, including your own kind of great understanding of well-being and how people perform and how people are motivated.
Yeah, well, I have to say I'm totally in agreement with what I've heard so far. I guess there's, a couple themes that I would add to it that we've seen from our perspective in terms of what our clients are struggling with, and really as our own organization, right? And myself as a all of a sudden remote employee. First, I think there is this just major renewed understanding of that the most valuable asset in any organization are the people. And doubling down on the fact that if your people aren't healthy, right, if they're struggling with health, and when I define health, it's not just physical health, it's mental health, it's emotional health, it's financial health, or all of a sudden you're struggling as a caregiver, you're in a primary caregiver role where someone you're caring for is struggling with one of those issues. All of that creates a barrier for that human to show up as their best self and thereby give their best self to their employer, right? I think we've seen that even though we know that to be true, there were a whole lot of people that tried, right? That tried to maintain their level of excellence, their level of engagement at the employee level while dealing with all of these various, again, across the spectrum of health issues. And I think that really falls into play with where we see this escalating rate of burnout or self-described burnout. It's either burnout or it's checkout, right? Where we've seen so many caregivers leave the workforce because they really just decided they couldn't do it all. And they didn't necessarily have the tools, or we didn't as a universal, employer organization figure out how to support that in a really holistic way. What we've seen is the employers that figured that out fairly early and put in tools to support particularly caregivers or in the mental health space and really, again, double down on that early. We're seeing that their retention rates and their employee satisfaction rates are better than what we've seen across kind of the spectrum there. So I do think that's one of the things that we will continue to see and really need to pay attention to. I think the second theme is really about that culture piece. The glue that we all experienced working in an office, those fleeting social connections, whether we were talking about work or our family or simply the weather, there was something about that glue that really created support, not just for the employee experience, but also for people's mental health. So when that went away overnight, a lot of organizations have struggled, whether it's, being able to really lean into teams or all of a sudden have access to things that their organization didn't let them have access to before, but creating that replacement for creating the space that allows that social connection has been a huge focus for us and something that we continue to see coming out of the pandemic.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Larry, as a CEO who has a team to manage and as a person running an enterprise, and then also someone who's creating HR products for other companies, what is your take on this whole big change? I think, Larry, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Everything changed. I moved to New York City about 9 months before the pandemic, expecting a different kind of personal life experience, and then watched a business that was very New York centric. All of our employees virtually were in New York, watched the world kind of shatter before our eyes. Now, we were fortunate. We were able to take the business remote quickly. We were able to respond to that. But really, that was just the beginning, of course, because as a technology provider, our customers had all kinds of unique needs that had very high levels of urgency. So, and I personally ended up escaping to California when the worst of the pandemic hit here in New York City. And so I have the fondest memories of my 5:30 a.m. stand-up meetings as we were trying to help customers deal with all the chaos, the PPP loans in the United States, et cetera. But more importantly, what changed dramatically was everything that people thought about work, and to some degree life. And I think that those were some of the, those were the seeds that drove the Great Resignation. And certainly in the United States, we had this perfect storm. We had COVID, which hit New York very, very hard. And then, of course, if you pay any attention, our COVID became a political football for reasons I will never understand. But then add to that, we had massive social unrest, the Black Lives Matter movement. We had the most controversial presidential election in our country's history. And, of course, now we have war in Europe. So everything we knew that grounded us changed. And then on top of it, we were working from our homes for many people for the first time in their lives. And so, the technology part of that was relatively straightforward, not nearly as interesting. But as a CEO, I had to completely rethink how I led. I had to become better educated as a white man of privilege about what it meant to be socially responsive in light of everything that was going on. I have the good fortune of 2 30-year-old daughters who gave me hourly reality checks, so that was kind of helpful in respect. So I had to change immensely as a leader, and then I had to translate that and help guide our teams how to live and how to thrive. And I think we were very fortunate in that our employee engagement actually increased during that period, but it wasn't without huge amounts of effort. And so then I think, it took a few months before kind of this notion of great resignation came up. And honestly, what I did was embrace it. It's like, people's lives are changing and it may no longer be the right place for a person to work. I tried to avoid that, if everyone understands this colloquialism, that the grass is greener. If you convince yourself that anything has to be better, a lot of people made jumps that they regretted. But in general, I think we were very fortunate in by sticking to our mettle and really focusing on our core values. We were able to help guide folks, through this. I would still say we're still not out of it. And we became a completely virtual company. We don't have any offices anymore. So for us, the change was permanent.
Excellent. So you have managed to take a problem and turn it into an advantage or a solution.
Well, that might be a stretch, but yeah, sure. I'll take it.
Atit, last one on this, because this is kind of setting the stage for a software company where something like a 40% attrition is not too unheard of. You can directly impact the P&L of the company by helping provide great experiences that help people stay on longer. So what's your take on this whole big change, and how do you see people like us in HR finally contribute to the bottom line of the organization?
Thank you. And I think some great points have been made by my fellow panelists. So each of what they've mentioned plays a huge role, and I'm not going to repeat that. But I think there have been realizations on where people want to spend their time. There is a focus on wellness. For organizations, people are their most important assets. For people, time is the most important asset. And hence, people are becoming more and more cautious about where they spend the time. The advent of technology has been immense. So what happens is there is this dichotomy between what you experience in your life as a consumer and what you experience in your life inside of an organization. And it is getting increasingly hard to deal with that dichotomy, right? And increasingly frustrating, because if Amazon can deliver your laptop in 3 days, and you start in a new organization, and for the first week you don't have your laptop, you start to question, like, what's going on here, right? I think Larry made a very interesting point in terms of, given the social changes, organizations are expected to respond to them. Employees have an expectation to know what is the organization's stand, for example, on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What is the organization's stand on the Black Lives Matters movement? So these are all new elements that are challenging organizations today.
Excellent. So if we just stay on that point, and you obviously have a formal chief employee experience officer role, how are you creating the employee experience platform for Wipro? How are you defining the concept? How are you listening to people, helping co-create solutions, and so on?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think at the broadest level, employee experience is all encompassing, right? So from the time there is a passive candidate who is experiencing your brand to the time, the individual onboards, performs, goes through their learning and growth, and becomes hopefully a promoting alumnus. So it's a fairly wide spectrum. I think what's important is for every organization to define what is it in their respective context. And the reason why I say that is, if I take the Wipro example, it is about enabling colleagues to be their best, cutting across internal functions, because we've operated through internal functions in the past, in course of their everyday work. So I give you the example of Amazon and the consumer technology industry, and making the moments that matter special through a layer of personalization that sits on top of the of employee experience, a lot of which is people leader or manager driven. So that is how we would define it at Wipro. Now there are multiple layers of maturity that a lot of research has on employee experience. I think most organizations, they will not admit it, are at a level which is level 0, which is really more around removing the irritants first. So you remove irritants, and then you move to transaction, and then you move to a social organization and a value-based organization, and essentially move up the hierarchy. So I think that's how I would define it for Wipro. And again, our reality is we hire close to about 80,000 people each year. So onboarding for us as a process, for example, becomes extremely critical. Now, some other organizations' reality may be a little different. The second question that you asked about listening mechanisms, I think there's again been a lot of debate here in terms of what's the right one. Is it annual, biannual, quarterly, weekly? I think if you ask colleagues, what they want today is a form of continuous listening and responding. And that's one of the key elements that we are trying to build into our employee experience platform.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Atit. Larry, what's your take? You're building technology, you're helping companies solve their human resources related problems. So how do you define employee experience? Because it's a term that a lot of people are using these days.
Yeah, I'm always very cautious as a CEO of a software company. What I always find lacks credibility is when we say, use our technology and your employee experience will improve. So I'm always very cautious to say, we provide a set of enabling tools that can drive a great corporate employee experience strategy. And so that first and foremost starts with the employee before they arrive for their first day. So the onboarding experience, we know that swag is a must-have in 2022. So you got to have a beautiful package of swag that arrives ideally before the employee arrives. But then most importantly, create a terrific self-service experience for the employee to provide all that information that's necessary for them to work and get paid that very first day. And so we stay very focused on how those tools need to work with two areas of emphasis. One, which is what creates that great employee experience. It looks good, it feels good, it's easy, it makes sense. And then, of course, make it easy to administer. Our customers tend to have very light HR departments, 1, 2, maybe 3 at most. And so we have to make it easy and seamless. And when they need to change it, it needs to not be a complicated process where they have to have developed some expertise over time to do it. And of course, we try to support them in that effort. And we take a very similar approach in the way we think about it as a company as well. And first of all, use our own stuff, because that's, you can't be an HR software company and not use your own technology, and then share that feedback, with our product and engineering teams, to make sure that our tools stay current with how employees want to have that experience. Because at the end of the day, it's the quality of that engagement that brings an employee in, on a great first note. And then, of course, the work itself is very, very important as well. And occasionally we hire employees as part of our diversity and inclusion programs that don't necessarily have 100% of the skills necessary to do the job. So sometimes we onboard employees with a career development plan in place because we made a conscious choice to train them into full readiness for the role. So that's another important aspect of it that's important to us after the hire event has happened.
Mm-hmm. So it's a continuous process. It kind of constantly keeps going on. And that kind of puts in perspective how things were not too long ago. I had joined one of the largest banks in the world. And my first 1 week was just spent filling forms. I must have filled some 85 pages of forms where I had to put my name and employee number down at least 17, 18 times. And I was like, you know my name. Why do I have to write my name in every form? Why do I have to write my HR designation in every form? So I think that's something that is bound to change, because that is, as Atit mentioned, that's possibly level 0. Maybe that was level -1. So we need to kind of move on from there. So let's move on to the next phase where we kind of look at where this is going. And I recall it, things take time. Things take a lot longer to materialize than what we initially think. So I think it was about 10 years ago, I was going through this session by Linda Grayton, who's one of the greatest HR thought leaders, professor at London Business School. And I will never forget what she said. She said, we are trying to change the mindset from I go to work to earn money that helps me consume things that make me happy, into something which is I go to work to gain productive experiences that make me happy. So this whole mindset shift where I used to go to work to earn money, to buy stuff and think they would make me happy, to a different frame of mind where I go to work to get some experiences that make me happy. And by the way, in today's day, I may not go to one work, I may go to six workplaces at the same time, and I may not necessarily be bound by one employment contract. With all of this, we've still taken 10 years to start talking about employee experience in true spirit, right? So when we talk about how this is going to pan out, obviously one of the interesting things to do and something that excites everyone is crystal gazing. So my next question to Casey, Larry, both of you, where do you see this going in the next 3 to 5 years? How do you see technology, especially emerging technologies like even, I'm not even getting into metaverse, but things like AI, ML, and eventually things like metaverse, how do you think they're going to shape this whole employee experience landscape?
I'll go. Yes. I think, we've already touched on some of these things, but I think we will continue to see the importance of personalization, right? Where you have an N of 1 in terms of the employee experience, that we simplify it, right? And that it becomes more and more frictionless. I mean, I think about, your experience of filling out your name on the same form. I mean, that just can't happen anymore, right? That's just, we're moved way past that. I mean, when we look at our as an organization, our key performance indicators and look at our engagement stats, we're not comparing ourselves to other benefits platforms. Our competitors are Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And I think that, it's really about, we're trying to first win the attention. And then we're trying to keep the attention to the point we move people to action towards better health outcomes, action towards better engagement as an employee. Oops, sorry. So that's, and in doing so, we need to use AI, right? We need to use machine learning. We need to take the tools that social media platforms have been so successful in using to personalize, simplify, and bring people to action. And we need to take the best of that and be using that ourselves. And so that's really where we've been focused now for many years and continue to. I think, again, we often think in HR and benefits that we need to communicate to employees. instead of market, right? We're trying to grab their attention. I can't tell you the number of clients that have been like, we've told them this a million times. Yeah, but nobody read it, right? So how do we change how we think about engaging with employees to really take those tools that have been so successful in social media and changed it? I mean, I think we all, at the end of the day, we're fighting for those discretionary minutes and hours. That are taking up the hearts and minds of our employees. And, I would much rather have them engaged and enjoying and simultaneously growing and being satisfied with the experience and moving them towards outcomes that impact their health and engagement, as opposed to just simply having them spend their time in the same way, getting well-versed in the latest funny cat video. So that's really how we think about it. How do we use those same tools and transition to something that's positive?
So
And I think-
one size fits one in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, let's hope.
Okay. Larry?
I think Casey has it just right. I would take it a step further. And one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to use those techniques to create frameworks in the back office that don't create employee engagement disappointments. I'll give you 2 really great examples. One is when you take your child to the doctor. Of course, in the United States, we've got this crazy network of private healthcare providers. And we have to make sure that when you take your daughter to the doctor, that they're not going to get denied care because the insurance card wasn't properly activated, right? And so helping customers understand when they have done something that they shouldn't have done that could impact that experience is really important. Another one, which is fascinating in the United States, is that our research shows that our employers, our clients, are in 42% more states than they were 2 years ago, meaning that they're paying employees in 42 more localities than they used to, 42% more, which creates enormous taxing complexity in the US. And so I have had these moments where I've actually had to intervene with an employee because the thing got so messed up. I had one in Puerto Rico, which is notorious, where this was causing real personal grief for this individual. The customer had ultimately made the mistake, the administrator had done it wrong, and we were just trying to unwind it. And so how we proactively caution administrators that you haven't done something that might affect an employee's pay, or you need to do something in anticipation of a change, is also another really important way we're using technology to make a difference.
Right. Very, very interesting. Anugopal, what do you think about using technology, etc.?
Yeah. So when I look at things about personalization, Casey is 100% right. And the way I look at it is, if you remember many years back, like many centuries back, 1543 to be precise, Copernicus came back and said, you know what you're thinking is all wrong, right? Like, it is not the earth sun that revolves around the earth, it's the other way around. So we are in that conundrum here, right? So if you look at the typical way people used to think, Nishit, you also mentioned about it, is that, well, if I am going to be successful and if I'm going to be performing, then I'm going to be happy, right? So that was the way everyone thought about it. The interesting aspect of it was there was a definition around it. There was a clear definition around success, performance, because you have the performance evaluation coming out. You got your promotion from a tech lead to a senior tech lead, or whatever that be, because there was moments that happened right in that journey, and people associated success to that and happiness to that. But now it has changed. It is no longer about success, and this is about happiness. Now, the interesting thing about happiness is a very relative thing. It's a personal thing. And that's where the personalization thing comes into play. So we are now living with a bigger challenge, to be honest with you, of if we have to keep people happy, how do we do that? And that comes the size of one, right? It is individual now, right? And now it becomes a bigger challenge for organizations, whether it is 100 people organization or a 100,000 people organization. The challenge is just immense. And if you look at statistics, one of the interesting statistics I read was 50 years back, the unhappiness index was and depression, unhappiness, you can call it whatever it is, was kind of around the age of 29. Okay, but now it is at 14 and a half, which means people are even more mentally and physically understanding happiness and unhappiness as early as 14 years old, 15 years old. So think about how when they come to the next stage of their work and career, how much it is important to them, mental health, mental well-being, etc. So if you take happiness, if you take how can you measure it, goes back to your question about metaverse. How do you measure moments of happiness? And if you are able to measure moments of happiness, can you act on it? Like take Larry's example. I took my daughter to my doctor, and if the insurance card was declined at that point, I'm unhappy very clearly. Like whatever you have done for me for the last few days may not matter, but that one experience can actually make me truly unhappy and mess up the next set of days, right? So all of these really are important from a technology perspective. So how do you measure happiness is the first question. And secondly, if you're able to measure happiness, how can you do it on a personalized basis is the second question. And the third question is, as an organization, how can you react to that in a meaningful way? And then how can you get the acknowledgement from the employee that, yeah, someone is thinking about it, someone is looking after my interest, etc. And going back to what Atit was saying, the commoditization has really become a challenge. Like, yeah, if I can get an Apple laptop or within 2 days, why can't I get a laptop at work the day I joined, right? Because you knew I was joining much before, as an example, right? And there is an interesting dimension too. You talked about the number of forms you had to sign. But just as an example, I'm in Vancouver this weekend. I'm staying at a hotel. So day one, I go to the restaurant, I give my vaccination card and my stuff. I go next day, I give my vaccination card again. And the third day I give again. I said, you're seeing me for 3 days. There's absolutely no way for you to figure out that I've been here. And the answer is, this is the process. I said, I understand. But to let you know, there should be a slightly different experience for a person walking into your hotel every day morning, right? As an example. So that's the experience as a consumer I'm seeing. So think about the experience what an employee would be expecting, right?
Excellent. So let's stay on with that example of the customer, and let's kind of see, because you are in a customer facing role and you've seen how you can delight a customer, and let's learn from your experiences and let's try and find out what could derail this whole journey towards great employee experience. So what are some of the challenges? What are the hurdles that we could see around the adoption of great employee experience practices?
So my point is, I look at it as different use cases, right? As an example. So use case number one is existing employees, right, in the organization. They are the assets, as we call it, right? The second is the new employees who are joining us now, like in the last 2 years to now, right? And the third is, as you see in the market, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening between organizations. So what happens when two companies come together or two organizations come together? So 3 different dimensions, and each of them have a different, angle to it. The interesting thing about existing employees is at least they know the organization, they know what they are expecting, etc. But for the new people who are joining, they are not able to associate to the brand anymore because they're working from home. Like, so when you're working from home, your Microsoft Teams, your Zoom, like how do you feel the brand? How do you touch the brand? How do you experience the brand? And that's a big challenge. So if you ask someone who has joined us in the last 6 months or 1 year, and if you ask someone who has been with us for 3 years, you can see that there's a clear difference between their understanding of the brand, right? So that's another challenge that is up for people. And of course, when two organizations come together across different parts of the world, that adds another set of challenges. So for me, the biggest thing about it is you understand your context, you understand your use cases, and then you personalize it for that purpose. That's very, very important. It is not going to be like, yeah, let's go and do these 10 things and automatically things will happen. You need to understand what is required for your audience and your use cases and then solve for that.
Great. Casey, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, on that theme, I mean, as we think about, you're right. I mean, getting people connected to the brand as they're coming in, but I would go so far as to say we also need to be constantly evolving and refreshing for employees that are staying with us, what that brand is, and constantly helping them reconnect to it. I would throw out that when we think of that connection, we broaden it out to where is that created, right? And that's created in that cultural space and those social connections. And really, how are we taking a multimodal approach to how we're creating that? Right? With the in-person's gone, or it may be in parts, but it's not universal. So how do we think across those that, whether it's digital, whether it's IEG groups, I think it was interesting to talk about that feedback loop and the need to make that continuous now. It's not just a review cycle once or twice a year where we're getting that feedback. I know we've seen some real success in rolling out or really doubling down and rethinking about employee resource groups and employee impact groups, right? Where you're letting people naturally connect with others that have similar interests. And certainly, the Black Lives Matter, the DEI, some of these other efforts that have gone on have really, that's been a place to create more of those safe spaces and get those voices heard, as long as there's a structure in place for rolling up that feedback. So yeah, those would be my two pieces there, is how do we get over that just there's only one way to create these connections, either to the brand or to each other within the culture.
Right. So Atit, if you could add from your practitioner's perspective on that element, but also kind of lead us into the next part of the conversation, which is around how would you advise companies to start their own EX journeys? How important is EX for themselves? And maybe for your clients, if you could talk about that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Thanks.
I'll bring you back, Casey. So once Atit is gone, I'll bring you and Larry back in.
So I think both Casey and Anugopal made some fantastic points in terms of the ability to feel the employer brand. Larry mentioned earlier about the importance of swag. So I'm somebody who onboarded in a remote environment, and I can tell you all the swags on my table still are from my previous company. So and I think Anugopal brought out a very interesting situation again, which was what he experienced in the hospitality or the consumer space. I can assure you, if he had stayed in the hotel for a few more days, he would have tagged the CEO of the hotel saying, "What the hell is this?" And that's what employees have started to do today, right? And we do that when we are frustrated with a consumer brand. What do? We go to Twitter, we tag the CEO of the company and a couple of other people. Think of what it does to the employer brand for all the great work that we do, outside of that. Casey made a very interesting point earlier about competing with social media, right? And that's really what we are doing today. People at Wipro consume more information from LinkedIn than from communications that are pushed on emails. And there is this greater interconnectedness between social platforms and internal communication mechanisms and channels. So I think those are a couple of pieces that are happening today. I think the focus, I'll call out 2 points and then move to the next topic. The focus continues to be on implementation versus integration. We implement swanky SaaS-based tools on top of archaic HRIS, and many a times they don't work. Many a times they are constrained by the capability of your of the bottommost layer of your tech stack. So these are a couple of challenges. I think in terms of when it comes to adoption of some of these innovative solutions, I think the focus on change management is fairly limited. I was talking to global conglomerate which had adopted an employee experience platform. We're looking to do the same. So we were talking to them and they were like, well, the way the communication went out was, hey, yesterday you went to X site, tomorrow please go to Y site, right? So there was no focus or investment on what are the functionalities. The fact that this is how you would experience our organization in a hybrid world, because nobody's coming into swanky offices and campuses. Larry mentioned about how his company has moved completely to be completely remote. So I think these are some basic challenges that we face. I think the challenges at a interoperability level, metaverse is far out. We are still trying to simplify from 80-page forms to 5-page forms. So I think that's really where we are. Casey, you want to chat a little bit? Go ahead, and then I can go on to the next question.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I think, back to the frictionless, and you touched on that, right? I mean, you can add things in, right? You can double down, as we've seen, on all sorts of point solutions and other things that you tack on. But if you're tacking it on to a system that won't work or won't talk or won't create a seamless experience for the employee that's going to use it, more is not more. It's not a golden ticket. You really have to think about what that path is from the moment you're trying to grab their attention all the way through to the number of steps you're asking them to take. The more steps you're asking them to take, the better the reward better be. They're not going to get all the way down the journey. They're not going to use it, and you're not going to get the value of investment that you're hoping to get by investing in these various things that you hope to improve the employee experience. So, I think we're in good agreement there.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Casey.
Mhm.
So Nishit, you wanted me to touch upon in terms of how's the world changing and what's the advice on companies for companies starting their employee experience journey. So, I would say, and this is something which I had not realized, but customers today, and we bid on projects that customers have here in the B2B, IT services domain. So we bid for these projects, and in the past, customers would ask for organizations' approach to sustainability, to community, to environment, to safety, and they've started to ask us about employee experience results. They've started to ask us about what is your roadmap on enhancing the employee experience. So there is going to be a lot more, customer, shareholder activism around this in time to come. And it's already started. I mean, I spend about 10% of my time enabling my sales organizations, to bring these pieces in because the customer has demanded it. It's not out of our own goodness. It's because there is a demand for this. In terms of companies that are starting on their employee experience journey, the first advice would be hire a chief employee experience officer. But outside of that, I think what that does is it helps to build a culture of employee experience where people start to talk about the importance of employee experience. It's just like what happened with inclusion and diversity, right? So you first start to talk about it. You start to then build it as part of your day-to-day work. The caution that I would give is that it's a very wide topic. So based on your specific context, prioritize which area you're going to go after. It's not a project that will end in a year or year and a half. It's here to stay. It's a multi-year journey. So spacing that out becomes critical.
Absolutely. That's excellent. Larry, any advice from you on how this should be approached?
Yeah, I think, as much, Atit, as I'd love to reinforce this idea of hiring a chief customer experience officer. In every company I work with, all 1,300 of them, no such thing is ever going to exist because none of these companies are big enough. And I say that a bit tongue in cheek because what it results in is a very heightened obligation on the part of the CEO to do work that CEOs traditionally are not skilled at and in many cases have no interest in doing. And so what I see more often than not, it just gets delegated to the HR team. And it puts them in a very difficult position because they don't have the organizational influence for some of these initiatives. Yet the CEO, thinks that if they just say to HR, go solve my diversity inclusion problem, for example. And I had a client tell me this exact story. It creates, talk about creating influence for the Great Resignation in HR. I watch very closely a Facebook group of HR professionals in these kinds of companies, has probably 10,000 members. And the level of burnout you see from them happens every day as they're trying, with great enthusiasm to tackle these issues without the support they need. So what's really important is two things. You got to take small bites of this apple, and then you've got to push the most senior leadership to roll up their sleeves and help.
Excellent. Anugopal, anything to add? or Casey,
Yeah.
before we open up the questions?
I have
Anupam?
just one point. Yeah, I have just one point. I think what Larry said and Atit said, like, we have to move away from the concept of human resources and become more people and culture, because that's what it's all about. It's people and culture. And different sizes of organization have different challenges. So many people, small companies cannot afford a chief employee experience officer, but you can have change agents across the organization. Like it is a change which needs to come into the organization. That's where I would like to stop. Casey, off to you.
Again, so many good ideas here and things that we see that are working, right? That our clients are trying. I mean, culture champions, call them, brand them what you will. But, if you don't have a chief people officer, and I agree with Larry, even our largest companies aren't all going there yet, right? They may get a chief people officer now in place, but, that's another step that it's, it's trending, but it's a long way from being uniform across our client base. But we are seeing really good luck where they're, again, looking at that organic growth up. Like, how do we scale getting champions that we can get messages to, again, that multimodal, right? Where they're in their meetings and their chats in, the 5 minutes before a meeting starts, or the 5 minutes at the end, or the occasional happy hours, or these EIG groups that have got kind of are building and are focused on that. So I would, again, throw that out as something for those smaller companies that is doable no matter the size of your company.
I think someone was explaining the law of relativity to me in simple terms, saying, and I come from a hot place. So you're saying if you sit next to a fireplace, 1 hour seems like a day. And if you're sitting next to a beautiful person, 1 day seems like 1 hour. I think that's what has happened here. I didn't even realize we are almost at our 1 hour point. So I think it's time to open up the floor for questions.
I'm sure we have some fantastic HR leaders or business leaders in the audience, and I would love to see if they have any comments or any questions. You can unmute yourself and start making comments.
Maybe, hi, this is Priya Mathur.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Nishit, and thank you for inviting me for this webinar. And I thank all the panelists for very interesting and insightful, views that you have shared. Actually, my question was, around the point that Larry highlighted, that HR alone cannot, make the impact or bring in the required change. We need to work with our stakeholders who are CEOs, CXOs, or change agents at the ground level. So how do we create, a momentum amongst this population? Because of course a change is coming where people are not just doing the bottom line, they are realizing that, that to achieve the bottom line, the employee experience is pivotal. But if anybody would like to share some, views on how to, align the leadership.
Well, Priya, it's a great question. And first and foremost, you have to hone your leading with influence skills like you never have. That's job number one. The other thing I strongly advise is try to break it up into parts. So try to get your senior leadership, and maybe not just the CEO, but other operational leaders to carry some of the burden. The other thing I've done that's been somewhat successful is we've created employee resource groups that are led by employees that can provide strong and consistent advice back to you, which then can create the, perhaps ammunition, if you will, to help raise the awareness of the most senior leaders to drive change.
Anyone else?
Thanks a lot, Priya, for your question.
Thanks, Priya.
Okay. Thanks again, everybody, for joining today's panel, and we'll see you again. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.